Ladies and gentlemen, the Football Scoop Podcast is back. I'm at the beach. Happens. Father-in-law. God bless the man. Was grinding. JB is back from New York City, where he watched Notre Dame handle Army. I don't know how I feel about all that. I don't know. Notre Dame's playing really, really, really well. Gentlemen, today I wanted to get us together. I want to talk. It's getting real, right? We got one more regular season weekend coming up, and then conference championships. And the playoff picture got awesome over the weekend. And by awesome, I mean a hot mess of awesomeness. If you like arguing, you love it. I don't particularly like arguing, but Zach, look at you. Let's talk. Let's talk somewhat about the games, some more about the ranking possibilities. I'm gonna start at the top. I feel like Oregon, Ohio State, they're gonna play in the Big Ten championship. They're both in, right? Unquestionably.
No doubt.
Yeah. After Ohio State now, even if they go and lose twice to Oregon, they've got two premier victories in Penn State and Indiana. And so they're both those teams are in, and the winner of that game will be the number one seed to start the playoff.
Yeah. I will tell you guys, like a fool, I picked Indiana because I went all hard. I went Hoosiers. I just believed Jimmy Chitwood was going to hit the shot when he needed. And when that game started, I'm not telling you them. I can tell you the exact moment where I felt really good about my pick. It was that first drive where Indiana marched down the field, and it was a third and 6, third and 8. And the running back in pass pro stayed inside, and Ohio State had this defensive end coming around on he was about to dominate the quarterback. And the running back stayed inside, knew his assignment was that inside gap, and he picked up that defensive end or outside linebacker coming around. And I was like, ooh, Indiana's ready. And quarterback makes a throw, 3rd and 8, hits the guy right in the middle. I'm like, okay, well-coached team. Let's go. And then, I don't know, the penalties in the first half, the turnover,
I don't know if you guys saw I was watching the Fox pregame show, and they were on the field, and Urban Meyer, they were going around giving their predictions, and Urban Meyer was like, yeah, if you just stand here and look at these two teams, they're quite a bit different. They're galaxies different in terms of just sheer strength, size, brute force, all that stuff. And he was like, actually being on the field, all those guys were like, this is more than likely going to be a blowout in Ohio State's favor. And it proved to be the case. Indiana had a great early drive, but Jim Knowles figured out pretty quickly that he could send 5 and 6 on every passing down with zero fear that Indiana was going to make him pay for it. And as a result, Curtis Rourke had like 51 passing yards into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I thought the biggest difference in the game derives from that, Zach, and it is that Ohio State had answers for anything that Indiana might try to do on either side of the ball. And after that first drive and after Ohio State's first possession, Indiana did not have any answers for Ohio State, either offensively or defensively. Indiana appeared to feel that it couldn't match up with Ohio State's receivers, understandably, in man coverage. So they gave up a lot of stuff. They never pressured Will Howard. And I just thought the difference in the game was exactly that. Like, Ohio State made immediate adjustments because it had the players to adjust, and Indiana had no ability to adjust because the roster's just not there yet. And to the point about, I think the Big Ten winner, whether it's Oregon or Ohio State, I think will emphatically be the number one seed. And I think right now, as we incorporate some playoff discussion into this, the loser of the Big Ten game will still be the number 5 seed. So I think the Big Ten is going to end up with the number 1 and the number 5 seeds, therefore keeping Doug's prediction not only looking very strong, but giving them the only conference with 2 top 5 seeds.
I think the old coaching adage of games come down to 1 or 2 snaps, and you never know which 2 snaps those are. For me in that game, it was the 2 punt snaps. The
punt through his hands.
The completely unforced one that went through his hands, and then the punt return that went for a touchdown. And you take those 2 away, and the late touchdown that Ohio State poured on that they didn't necessarily need, and that's a completely different ball game. Indiana's defense still held Ohio State to 316 total yards. So to say that they're not deserving, and just I know we're going to get into the playoff picture stuff, but I mean, before that game, Indiana's strength of schedule was like 103rd. After that game, it was 51st. Like you jumped up 50 spots on strength of schedule based on one game. That's not a great metric to be using.
So the punt where the snapper goes through the Indiana punter's hands and that changed the game. But also right before that, Ohio State had like a 3rd and like 40. It was ridiculous. They had gotten down to field goal range, got way backed up, and they complete the long one. And then they go for it in the 4th and 10 and get it. If you stop them there, and if that punt doesn't happen, you go into halftime, a totally different game. So I don't think I'm not discounting Indiana at all. If you can build them back up, that team can be very dangerous. All right, moving right along. We got a challenging one here. Texas is way up in the rankings. They got A&M. A&M's a hurt dog, after what happened at Auburn. If A&M shocks Texas, Zach, talk to me. What I say shocks? Who knows? How does Texas play into all this?
It's all the conversation around Texas has so far centered around, well, they haven't beaten a top 25 team, but yada, 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 which is true. But it obscures the fact that this is one of the 5 best football teams in America. They dominated Kentucky way more than the final score and ran the ball all over them. Ran the ball 15 straight times or whatever it was to put the game away. Took 9 minutes off the clock. Just snatched Kentucky's souls from them. And you could say it's Kentucky, but Georgia and Ole Miss and Tennessee made that look pretty difficult to push Kentucky around. So this is one of the best teams. This win or lose at Kyle Field, this team belongs in the college football playoff, especially with what happened elsewhere in the SEC that we're going to get into. There's no way you could tell me this is not one of the 12 best teams in America. This is one of the 5 best teams in America. The Quinn Ewers conversation is an important one, but outside of that, the offensive line's coming together. They ran the ball to close the game at Arkansas, which Tennessee made that look difficult as well. They did it at Kentucky. I expect them to beat A&M, but even if they don't, this is a playoff-worthy team.
I think if I'm Texas, I don't want to leave it to chance. You can't because here's the best stat, and I can't take credit for it, but I'm damn sure about to use it on this podcast. And there's a chart out there that says teams that have played SEC teams. How many teams have played SEC teams with a winning record in conference play? There's 15, 14 SEC teams that have played another SEC team with a winning record in conference play. There's also UMass. There's one team who has not played an SEC team yet with a winning record in SEC play, and that is the Texas Longhorns. Texas absolutely needs this win this weekend. If not, then A&M goes to the championship game. I think A&M's only path into the CFP is to win its next 2. Otherwise, it's not getting in. But if it wins its next 2, then I would be pretty nervous if I was Texas.
Zach, which win are you going to point to tell me that these are absolutely one of the top 5 teams in the country? Florida? And Florida's a good win.
Yeah, Florida made Ole Miss look pretty bad. Oklahoma made Alabama look pretty bad. Their schedule, they don't have, obviously, a premier win, but they have a collection of solid wins. I had the stat last week that if they win out, they'll have 7 wins over the S&P plus top 40. Like, they have Florida's a solid win. Oklahoma looked pretty good. Vanderbilt's not a bad team. Arkansas, Michigan. Like, those aren't great wins, but they're not garbage either. And as we've seen, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia have made winning week in, week out in the SEC look pretty difficult. And Texas managed to win outside of one game, every game by 10 to 17 points week in, week out. That's got to count for something.
Explain to me what happened. Obviously they beat Texas A&M, and then the SEC championship game there. If they don't, explain that scenario to me. If they don't win this weekend.
If they don't win this weekend, then they're down there with Tennessee. But I don't see how you could put Ole Miss in ahead of them. I don't see how you could put Alabama in ahead of them. Those losses by teams that Texas beat handily certainly help their case. I think if Alabama and Ole Miss had won, we'd be having a different conversation, but they didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if Texas does not win this weekend, then there is a path to where the SEC only gets 3 teams in, And then Texas continues to sweat until the end of the SEC championship game, hoping like heck that it's not Texas A&M winning that contest. The biggest winner, in my opinion, of this past weekend was the ACC, because Miami eventually pulled away from Wake Forest, and then SMU handled business again. So I think right now, and we'll see what the rankings show Tuesday night, but again, I'm crowning Doug the king, because I think King Doug is going to be right about having 4 Big Ten teams in the playoffs. I think the SEC this past weekend was so much carnage that the league may only get 3 teams into the playoffs, 2 from the ACC, 1 Big 12, 1 Group of 5, and 1 from Notre Dame, and there's your 12 teams in the playoff. That's where I expect the field to be sitting when we get the latest rankings Tuesday night.
I definitely think you're right, John. The Big Ten is barring something catastrophic, the Big Ten's getting 4 teams in. And I mean, if you're Penn State, to beat Minnesota by 1, I mean, that is gold-plated, impressive stuff right there.
I think Penn State's kind of the big winner this week. I mean, they don't have to play in the Big Ten championship game. They're gonna play one final week and kind of slide in. If any team's sitting comfortable right now, it's Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you play a 1-game season, you don't score a touchdown in that game at home,
and you're in,
you deserve to host a playoff game. That's written into the United States Constitution.
Home playoff game, Happy Valley, whiteout. It's gonna be electric.
Yeah, we'll see if the CFP has the temerity to rank Penn State where it should Tuesday night. It's overvalued Penn State. Will that 26-25 win that's not without some debate with P.J. Fleck kicking a field goal down 4 with about 6 minutes to go in the game and at home against that Penn State defense? We'll see, but I think Penn State could drop a spot in the CFP rankings this week. That would be interesting to me if so.
Yeah, but even if they drop a spot, they're still solid.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. All right, Notre Dame is just thrashing people. I think Notre Dame's a very, very dangerous football team right now. JB, give me thoughts on them.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame has been a big winner. When I've been asked in recent weeks about that, I've said you want the SEC to start eliminating some teams, and I think we saw that this weekend with Ole Miss and Alabama more or less being completely eliminated from the picture, particularly Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin flat out saying this is like the NFL. We have a game left and we're eliminated from the playoffs. So Notre Dame is getting really much better play from Riley Leonard. Jeremiah Love is in the discussion for the best running backs anywhere behind Ashton Jeanty. Let me make that clear. Well behind Ashton Jeanty, but he's up there in the discussion. He's really, really good. He's averaging 7 yards a carry this year, with closing in on 900 yards rushing, and he's only got like 7. He's only got like barely over 100 rushing attempts. So they've spread the love around well in the backfield. They're positioned to host, and the full expectation here in South Bend is not only that they will get to host as long as they handle business against a dangerous USC team on the road this weekend, but that contest will be the Friday night kickoff to the college football playoff. There's a very strong belief Notre Dame will be in the 8 p.m. time slot on Friday, December 20th, as long as the Irish continue to be on path to host that game.
I think Notre Dame is undervalued, and so much of the discourse around the playoff, and it's really just human nature. We want shortcuts in our mind. We want to put people and teams into boxes, and so we end up reducing 12-game seasons down to what's your best win and what's the quality of your loss. And Notre Dame has the worst loss. But they've played, last I checked, 10 other games and done excellent in all those. The A&M win is a great win. They pummeled a previously undefeated Army team. This, to me, they should be in that conversation for the 5 seed and no worse than 6, and definitely above Penn State in my mind.
Yeah, 100% above Penn State. Nobody would opt to play Notre Dame right now versus Penn State.
Especially, again, to your all's points, because if Penn State gets to host, you've got the potential for some fantastic weather. But if Notre Dame is hosting and going to get to kick this first ever 12-team playoff bracket off, and the first time to ever have FBS level playoff games on home campuses, if they're going to get to do it on a Friday night under the lights, I hope that there's snow blowing all around Touchdown Jesus that night.
I don't think there's enough hotels in South Bend and the surrounding area to house everyone for that game. So there's going to be some Airbnbs making some good money.
I know a guy.
The Football Scoop staff can hook you up. If you need an Airbnb in South Bend, let us know.
No fees. If you're listening and you need it, no fees.
Nice place, no fees. Good talk. Airbnb is now going to come after us and shut this podcast down. Okay, moving right along. All right, here's what I want to do. I want to talk Group of 5, and then I want to come back to all the other teams because there's a stack of all the other teams. So Group of 5, right? We've got Boise State is now going to play UNLV, likely, because Colorado State lost. Colorado State kept looking decent, but they really weren't very good, but they finally got tripped up. So Boise State, UNLV, and Army Tulane. Genty is the best player in America. Genty's hurt. I don't know if y'all can see it. The dude's hurt. He's hurt more than they're saying. And he's still a warrior, and he's out there, and he's battling. He went for like 170 and a touch or something like that. But Boise State's not as good because he's dinged up. UNLV's playing real well. So what happens if that's a great game, but UNLV wins? And Army Tulane, I think, is going to be a really good football game. I don't know who's going to win. What happens in that scenario?
I think Tulane is the best Group of 5 team, period. Whether you're talking about the health or not of Ashton Genty, I think Tulane is closing the season in incredible form. They're controlling games week after week, not just winning games. They're dominating what's in front of them. I agree that Army-Tulane game is going to be fascinating, and I still think we've got one more week of games to find out who gets to host in that contest. So remember, that could be Tulane having to go up to Mickey Stadium, which is small on the banks of the river there. Obviously, would be expected to be quite cold in the second weekend of December in upstate New York. So that's very curious to me. But I just think that Tulane, from having seen all those teams more than once, I think Tulane is the best Group of 5 team.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Not that long ago, we were talking about Navy undefeated, and then they roll into Notre Dame and get rolled. But Tulane just dismantled them 35-0. I mean, I agree with JB. They look like the best Group of 5 team right now.
Yeah, Tulane's given up 9 points combined in their last 3 games. That dog will hunt. And to your point, Scott, I think there's a chance that Boise State and the American winner both get in if the quote-unquote wrong team wins the Big 12. That conference said there's 9 teams still in the running to play for the Big 12 championship. And you could – unlikely, but if you have a West Virginia somehow win the Big 12, then the Big 12 will watch the college football playoff from their couch.
Yeah, I didn't realize that West Virginia was one of those. But the easiest
no
way,
idea they were in it.
I know there's like all these permutations of how this team and Big 12. If you'll go back to Big 12 media days, Brett Yormark said before the season started, we're going to have a heavy media blitz in November about the competitive nature of our conference. So this is Big 12 would probably like to have 4 undefeated teams if it could right now. But the fact of the matter is, Brett Yormark, he's pretty good with the marketing and strategizing the best ways to shine his conference in a positive light. And so this is exactly what the Big 12 wanted. But you boil it down to the fact that if Arizona State beats Arizona, and gosh, Arizona is struggling, and if Iowa State wins its finale, those are your 2 teams that will be in the Big 12 championship. That's the easiest way to look at it. Colorado got smacked by that dream killer Kansas over the weekend. And Kansas suddenly can make a bowl game if they win their finale. But that's it. Arizona State is playing incredibly well. Kenny Dillingham with some of the most incredible video and facial expressions ever over the weekend. And when officials told him 1 second was left on the clock, and Arizona State still had to go out and officially beat BYU again. So, but you're right, Zach. If something chaotic happens and the Big 12 gets the wrong team in, the Big 12 became completely a one-bid league over the last 9 days, with BYU losing twice, with Colorado stubbing its toe. That's that.
Yeah, to be clear, so for West Virginia to get in, they obviously have to win their last game, but then you'd have to have Arizona State lose to Arizona and Colorado lose to Oklahoma State. So highly unlikely, but still possible.
That's the most staggering thing I've heard, that West Virginia is still in it. That doesn't speak well of Big 12. Anyway, all right, Zach. I believe if Tulane beats Memphis, Tulane then hosts the Army championship game, right?
I think that's right.
Do I have that right?
I'm actually that type of thing I should know. I'm actually not. Tulane is ranked ahead of Army in the CFP rankings for what that's worth, and Army figures to drop. Both teams would be 8-0, so I believe you're correct, but I can't sit here and.
I think so as well.
Yeah,
I think that's. I talked to some Army folks over the weekend, including Aiden Opfer, and he was trying to explain some of those scenarios to me to see who would determine who was ranked the highest. And I do believe that it has to do with CFP rankings and then common opponents, and maybe even gets down to score margins, since they obviously have no head-to-head to base it on.
and that you're talking about a material impact on that game. You're playing in New York in early December versus New Orleans. You're playing different football games.
All right, Zach, let me make sure I understand what we're saying here, because I think this is critically important. If let's say the Big 12 gets a little weird, who cares? But if Boise wins the conference championship, beats UNLV, and let's just say Tulane beats Army pretty handily, if both teams shine, they both move up in the rankings, do you believe both of those two teams would get into the playoff?
Yes, I do. In that scenario, I think Tulane would jump Boise to get the first round bye, and Boise would then become the 12 seed and play the Big Ten championship loser, but they'd be in the field. And I think in that scenario, I think you would see Tulane hosting in the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, wherever that game is.
Laissez le bon temps rouler.
Yeah, let the
I
good
don't know what
times
that means,
roll.
but I agree.
Let the good times roll, baby.
That means John Summerall's a badass. That's what that means. All right. Let's go back to the mix, because there's a lot of teams in the mix, and we're just going to talk them through. Let's talk Georgia. Tell me about Georgia's case for making it.
Well, they can't overlook Georgia Tech this weekend. We've seen Georgia Tech be very capable, especially under Brent Key. That's sort of his MO, is that he's really, really good in underdog roles, and he's got some pretty nice rugs on the wall from some big wins in his 2+ years at the helm of the Rambling Wreck. So they have to handle business against Georgia Tech, and then once they do that, there's not a fiber of my body that believes Greg Sankey would allow the SEC championship game loser of Georgia, if it's Georgia, to not make the playoff field. That's where I think the SEC could have a 3-loss team in the field, is if it's Georgia. But if Texas and Georgia both handle business this week, it's those two teams meeting in the championship. They would both be in. But I think Tennessee is poised to benefit the most. I think Tennessee is sitting to where it has to go win at Vandy, which will not be easy. But I think the Vols will ultimately on Selection Sunday have a chance to be the second highest seeded SEC team. Georgia, if it wins, will be the number 2 seed. If it wins out this week and then beats presumably Texas in the title game, it will swap places in the CFP pecking order with Texas and be that number 2 seed, get that first round bye. And look, Georgia has looked bad early season on the road against Alabama before storming all the way back to take the lead. I don't think any of us would pick Alabama to win a rematch of those two. Georgia has the win where it absolutely suffocated and dominated Texas on the road, and it was only a controversial play that allowed Texas to get back into that contest. And then Georgia just absolutely manhandled Tennessee across the second half. So I think Georgia has the collection of most impressive wins of anyone in the SEC, and as long as it handles business, will be the SEC champion and the number 2 seed.
And I think you're absolutely right. And the weird thing about Georgia's situation right now is they could lose to Georgia Tech on Saturday, win the SEC championship, and be probably the number 2 seed at that point, because they've beaten presumably Texas twice and Tennessee and Clemson. That's the best collection of wins anyone would have. So this Georgia Tech game, depending on what happens after it, could mean everything or could mean nothing.
Yeah, and to Zach's point, Georgia beat Florida at a neutral site. So that's another win that looks better week after week for the Bulldogs.
So, JB, is your assertion that Tennessee is going to be the highest SEC team other than the two that play in the championship game?
It is.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
right.
It is.
Okay. Okay. Who could challenge Tennessee for that third SEC spot, so to speak? Who appropriately could?
I guess the
Ole Miss
question
and
is,
Alabama, right? South Carolina?
yeah, the question is Ole Miss, Alabama, and Alabama. Both of those teams beat Georgia, which is the weird thing. But they've got some really bad performances, some absolute stinker performances on their resume. I'm thinking of Ole Miss losing at home to Kentucky, and then what we saw from Alabama this past weekend. And it's a question of what version of those teams does the committee choose to see? Because as we know, you can they rank their teams and then figure out their criteria afterwards. I think Alabama will remain above Ole Miss, but that's just my opinion.
Well, here's one thing to consider when you say who could challenge them or who could be potentially that third team. Let's see. The only team in the SEC left that can really help itself with a quality win on the final day of the regular season is South Carolina against Clemson. So if South Carolina boat races Clemson, it's a 9-3 team, and I think it enters the discussion as the potential third team from the SEC, or if things break a certain way, the potential fourth team, because it would have a 3-point loss against LSU. It would have like a 2-point loss on the road against Bama, and then it got absolutely handled at home by Ole Miss. But there's hardly anybody playing better football over the last 6 weeks of the season than the South Carolina Gamecocks, and they're getting great pressure from their defensive front. Their O-line has come together. Lenora Sellers is playing much better. So that's a scenario where I think that's a team that enters the picture as long as they thump Clemson, and then depending on what happens with some other games breaking different ways.
Yeah, I just don't see South Carolina. I hear you, but it's tough for me to see South Carolina getting in over two teams that it lost to with with identical records, when it lost both those games head to head. And Ole Miss, they lost handily at home.
Yeah. So here's the other curveball. What if A&M beats Texas pretty well? Like what if A&M wins by 17?
Then I think Texas is probably sitting there hoping to be the number 11 seed in the CFP the following weekend, and then they become a huge Georgia fan, and they hope that Georgia handles Texas A&M to make A&M a 4-loss team and keep them out of the discussion. And then I still think you would have then Georgia, Tennessee, and then Texas probably getting that third SEC spot as a 2-loss team with no real great wins. But they're going to be nervous. If that's the scenario, they're going to be really, really nervous.
You think Texas would get in over A&M in that scenario?
Yeah, because Texas would still only have 2 losses and A&M would have 4.
A&M beat them the week before. Okay. All right. This is where the playoff is awesome.
Anyone disagree with me, though?
No, I think you're right. It's a dumb system, but I think not a dumb system. It's an imperfect system. Yeah. And I think that's the committee would then say, well, we're judging 12 games and not just one game.
I agree. Yeah, I know. I hear you. This is fun. All right, let's talk ACC for a second. So some very good football teams, SMU, Miami, Clemson. Talk to me about what's at play here.
So Clemson, I think Clemson obviously has a huge game against South Carolina. John, I haven't looked this up yet. Are we clear on who gets in, Clemson or Miami? Assuming Clemson's done in the clubhouse at 7-1. Miami still has one game to go. Are we clear on who gets in there? I haven't looked it up.
I thought it was Miami. I thought that as long as I thought Miami and SMU both control their destiny. I
think so.
So I'm at a point now where, assuming SMU still has to play at Cal or home against Cal, assuming they win that one, I believe SMU is in the field. I think this team is good enough. I think this is one of the 10 best teams in America. I think if SMU beats Cal, then the ACC needs to hope that Miami turns around and beats SMU, just to then get 2 teams in the field, and potentially 3 if Clemson's able to beat South Carolina this Saturday. Clemson's playing for its season against South Carolina. I think SMU is good enough to get an at-large bid. Miami doesn't have great wins. I don't think Miami's even played a top 25 team at any point this season. So if they turn around and lose the ACC championship to SMU, they're probably out. But I think SMU should be in regardless, assuming they win.
So SMU has clinched the berth. Miami has to knock off Syracuse, which can score some points and has been up and down this year, but has a nice offense. Miami has to beat Syracuse to clinch a spot in the SEC or the ACC championship game in Charlotte. That to me is the best case scenario for the ACC to get two teams in. It's got to be Miami and SMU. Those are the league's two highest rated teams in the CFP. I don't think that's going to change this week. And then, yes, Clemson could potentially enter the conversation, but I just have a hard time seeing it.
So there's a couple of teams that put together big runs. Clemson, after Georgia beat them, Clemson went hot, right? It took them a little bit. Then they got hot, and then they got tripped up by Jeff Brom, as happens. I think the committee could kind of look past that. Tulane, after they lost good games to Kansas State, they should have beat Kansas State, and they tripped up against Oklahoma. But then Tulane's been on fire. Notre Dame, Northern Illinois happened, but then Notre Dame's wrecking people. I see, if Clemson handles South Carolina, which who knows if they will or not, that's a really quality win. And you can make a case for them. SMU, after, tripping against BYU and they played terribly, SMU's been on an incredible run. SMU should play. They should be in no matter what. I agree. They're really good. All right. I got a bunch of – gosh, I'm almost scared to enter the Big 12 world because it's hot. That's like you guys discussed. So Arizona State is one of those teams that didn't start well, and then all of a sudden they're playing extremely well. If Arizona State keeps rolling, Iowa State had that great run and has tripped up. But Iowa State, those are the two that America is kind of cheering for, right? The non-chaos version?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what – go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, yeah, every other league out there, especially the ACC and the SEC, have never been larger Big 12 fans specific to Sun Devils and Cyclones. Like, I don't know what kind of rituals or dances or anything else that they can do in those regions of the country, but that's what those teams in contention, the Clemsons, the South Carolinas, the Alabamas, the Miamis, they're all hoping like heck that Big 12 chalk, such as you can call it chalk, walks the rest of the way through the season.
Are you referring to dances being done in like the SEC world or back in the Big 12?
I'm referring to dances being done in the SEC world and the ACC world. You want chalk to hold so that the Big 12 remains a one-bid league. And so you don't want the chaos, like Zach described earlier, of potentially having some unexpected Big 12 title game winner, be that a BYU or West Virginia or whomever, but then Arizona State still finishing strong or Iowa State still finishing strong. That's the rest of of college football that has a vested interest wants it to be the chalk game, which would be the two teams that truly control their destiny left in the Big 12, and that's Arizona State versus Arizona and Iowa State with its home finale.
Which is the dances. The dances in the SEC are very there's a back of a truck, a case of beer.
Very different.
Pretty simple.
I'm still stuck on who America is rooting for to win the Big 12 because you could go so many different directions. I think America would love to see Arizona State host the Fiesta Bowl basically on campus. That would be, talk about Arizona State's the number one party school in America with the number one party head coach. What a scene that would be. I think America wants to see Shedeur and Travis Hunter play in the playoff, and Colorado would bring a big fan contingent to the desert. And I think America's not rooting for BYU, but BYU playing in the Fiesta Bowl would be a good scene as well.
Doug's shaking his head. He is not on the Coach Prime hype train.
I think I said this last week. Do I think they're a very good team? Yes. Do I think they're one of the top 12 teams in the country deserving to be in the college football playoff based on their product on the field? No, I do not. And I think that was proven this past weekend with them getting just rolled by Kansas.
I will tell you guys, if your team winds up playing Arizona State in the Fiesta Bowl, you need to go there and find a hotel. I think it's Mill Ave. You get a hotel in Mill Ave and enjoy that scene the night before, the night of, it's unbelievable. It is absolutely spectacular.
Might see Kenny Dillingham out about it.
The first time I ever met Scott, before he even officially started at football school, we basically met at Mill Ave in Tempe, Arizona.
It was incredible. Just stunningly amazing. Send your son there. That's all I can say. All right. Big 12's a mess. All right, let's bring me back to the Big Ten, and I want to hear who are those 4th, 5th teams. We know Ohio State, Oregon. Penn State's 3. Indiana, I feel real good about personally. Am I crazy?
No.
And is there
those are
what you got?
Those are the 4 right there. You just named them. I mean, I don't think there's a 5th team really sneaking in. It's those 4 teams. I'm not going to listen to any back talk about why Indiana does not deserve to be in. I think we just kind of laid claim on why they do, and Coach Sick is using all the negative talk after their loss to kind of fuel them moving forward, and that they're a team I wouldn't want to see. I wouldn't want to see a pissed off team in the playoffs. So it's those 4 teams. I did say my one bold prediction, a quarter of the field to be Big Ten teams. I did, full disclosure, I did not have Indiana being one of those 4. Maybe another school that just punched their first bowl trip since 2016, I might have mentioned, or Wisconsin, but Indiana was not on that radar, but I will gladly still take credit for it.
Yeah,
they all wear red. They're close enough.
Yeah, you get the collective credit for sure, Doug. I agree. It's those 4. And I think Indiana is a huge beneficiary of what happened throughout the SEC after they played in the noon game and got dominated, because they needed a lot of stuff to start happening the rest of the day and going into next weekend to still feel good about it. I'm not debating the merits of them as a playoff team. I'm just saying after they stunk it up in the shoe, then the rest of college football did Indiana a huge favor as the day wore on, with that Oklahoma win over Bama and with Ole Miss melting down in the swamp and on and on.
Yeah, Doug looked into the flames and saw a surprising Big Ten team that wears red make it to the playoff, and he just assumed Nebraska. I mean, it happens. Prophecy's never that clear.
All right, so we got 3 rankings left to come, right? We have Tuesday night, tomorrow night, and then we have after the regular season finale, after the conference, and that's it. God bless America. I'm fired up for all of this. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you guys, close us out with what was the most entertaining thing you saw all weekend in college football, or not in college football?
Hey, I'll go first. Number one, we got to mention Kenny Dillingham and the field storming twice at Arizona State, and him just losing his ever loving mind as the refs were watching that, and then to try and get everyone off the field was just, it took 15 minutes, was madness for 1 second to be left on the clock. Mine, I think I led off with the weekend leftovers was PJ Fleck finding his gum on the ground and picking it up and popping it back into his mouth, which I thought was bizarre, but you can find more like that in the weekend leftovers.
All right, for me, definitely Dillingham. I've already spoken on that. But then my other 2 favorite elements, aside from getting to see a game, the Army Notre Dame game in Yankee Stadium commemorating 100 years of the 4 horsemen riding against the blue-gray sky, would be 2 things from the Ohio State game. One being Will Howard mimicking stomping out a cigarette on the sideline. That was sublime right there. And then it also would be the Jumbotron operator at Ohio State who put a faux newspaper headline up there that said, Buckeyes win, Google it. And another clear haymaker on Kurt Cignetti, which Cignetti obviously has the personality to handle in stride. So those 2, Ohio State's troll game was every bit as good as its football team's actual game over the weekend. And then love him or hate him, and Doug and I had this discussion, there's no lukewarm feelings about Eli Drinkwitz. But Eli Drinkwitz walking down the sideline in Starkville after the cowbells have presumably quieted for the night and telling Mississippi State players to shut it up, or I'm going to score again. God bless the cameraman or camera person, camera woman who found that shot and made it happen.
Mine is the end of the A&M Auburn game. That was every time those teams play, it's crazy. Horrible OPI call against Auburn, but justice was eventually served with Auburn coming back to win. It felt horrible for the A&M receiver that dropped that pass. Had to be the sickest man in America, but it was an entertaining end to a wild college football game.
That wasn't the worst call of the weekend, though. That was
No,
the Alabama game where they had the receiver covered up. Clearly was not covered up. No idea how that call even happened. Worst call of the weekend.
I don't know what I might go with ESPN cutting away and not even doing Billy Napier's on-field interview, but they did record it. I saw it online after. Napier's pretty damn proud of what those guys have come back to, and I'm happy to see. Napier's a great guy. For whatever reason, it wasn't working originally. Happy to see it working out for that dude. Drink, maybe even funnier than what Drink was doing on the field is Dave Portnoy somehow has I don't know, but Portnoy is Drink was yelling. I don't even know who he's yelling at. And there's levels to what Portnoy is doing there. It's something. It's something. Gentlemen, we are the Football Scoop Podcast. It's been fantastic. Let's have a great week. A lot of coaching things happening. Stay tuned to the website. Footballscoop.com is our favorite website. We hope it's yours as well. We're out.